they have so much cash. They are able to gobble up whole communities. Is that fair? Is that responsible? Is that something that we want? Personally, I don't.
How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Shawn and Matt Show. My name is Matt, that is Shawn, and welcome to our show. Shawn, in today's episode, we're talking about 10% interest rates. Will we see them? There's also a big vote on Nantucket that we're going to talk about, and possibly a crackdown on hedge funds purchasing real estate and how that's going to affect housing prices in America. Shawn, let's first start with 10% mortgage rates. There was a recent survey that came out that said consumers expect rates to hit 8.7% in a year and a 9.7% in 3 years. There's also a Fannie Mae's monthly consumer survey that shows a similar trend, with sentiment remaining flat as rates remain elevated. So, Shawn, with everything happening in the economy and the election coming up, by the way, that's around the corner. I saw there was was it RFK Jr.? Is that his name? Mm-hmm. A video that everyone's talking about, and I really wanted to watch it, and then it was 30 minutes long. Yeah, and I was like,
was this about the worm in his brain?
I don't know. I think so.
Yeah.
And listen, we're not a politics show. We're not going to get into it, but I was like, man, all right. So
yeah.
Anyways, there's a lot of factors: inflation, unemployment rates. My question to you, Shawn, is what's going to happen when we see double-digit rates? What is that sentiment going to be? Because, by the way, another article that didn't make the cut, it was chopped on the cutting floor for this episode, was another article that came out that said 80% of Americans think that now is a bad time to purchase real estate. I was like, wait a second, Shawn and I already talked about this 8 months ago, and it was like the same survey, but like updated. And so like 80% of people still think that it's a bad time to buy a house. So I mean, what's it going to be when 10% interest rates hit? Is it going to be like 99% of people think it's going to be a bad time to buy a house? I mean, certainly there's not like a great time and a bad time, because honestly, I wasn't so, keen on people in 2021 and 2022, going 150 grand over, going 200K over. I'm like, what are these people doing? But then we look back and they're like, okay, well, they locked in a 2.75 interest rate. Yeah. Maybe their payments, their sales price is higher. Maybe it didn't appraise, but they're sitting pretty at 2.5%. So, Shawn, what are your thoughts on a possible 10% interest rate?
It's possible. The thing is, everybody's speculating. Everybody's thinking that interest rates are just going to drop out of the sky. The Fed's going to drop them. We know that that's going to happen at the second half of the year. And guess what happens? New inflation numbers come out. Inflation went up instead of going down. And what happens when inflation goes up? The government has to try to combat that in some way. The only way that they can combat that right now is by increasing interest rates to try to stop inflation. That's what they did. That's why interest rates went up so much over the last couple of years. And so there was all this positivity in the market. They're thinking, all right, well, we're finally hit the inflation numbers down to around the 2% mark. And then next thing comes out, it's above 3 again. It's popped. So everybody freaks out. The interest rates go up because there was a thought in every interest rate or every mortgage company's eyes thinking that interest rates were going to come down. So they kind of bake that into their rate. And then all of a sudden new numbers come out and they're bad, and boom, rates pop. So what's going to happen in the future? How do we get inflation in control of inflation? And I'm no expert I'm no economist or anything like that, but what has the government done before? They've increased interest rates. That is then going to follow into mortgage interest rates, which could go up. I mean, if we see bad numbers, again, inflation increase next, we have to do something. And what's the Fed going to do? They're going to increase them. So yeah, they're going to go up into the 8s. They're going to start creasing into the 9s, possibly. Do I hope that happens? Heck no, man. But what is going to happen? No one knows. Stop speculating. We don't know, because remember when we were talking about interest rates and we were in like the 2.5% fever, right? We were like, interest rates are never going to pop. And then in a year, we saw them pop and we're like, whoa, we never saw this coming.
They popped so hard.
We never saw it coming. No one could, think that was going to happen. Well, No one knows what's going to happen. And for people to speculate that they're coming down, it's totally false. And so what has to happen is positive or negative inflation. We need to get that inflation down for interest rates to come down. And until that happens, they're not going to come down. I'm sorry. It's just not going to happen.
So we're commenting on the speculation, but maybe we're also speculating as well.
Exactly.
So
we're all speculating, but you have to look at reality. And reality is inflation is killing us. And if we can't get a hold of inflation, interest rates are going to continue to rise.
So last week, the 30-year mortgage averaged 7.22%. By the way, we haven't seen 8%. I think we got up to like 7.9. We haven't seen 8% in 24 years, since 2000. And now we're talking about what happens if we hit 10. So what happens if we go up like 2.5%? Like that's a big jump. Sure, 2.5% to 6.5%, that was a larger jump. But now that we're up at 7.22, and we got to get to 10, or some people think that we're going to get to 10. I don't know if I see that happening.
Yeah, what would happen if that actually did go to 10%? We can speculate, but I don't think it would have a huge impact. I go back and forth because some weeks I'm like, wow, interest rates popped. And a couple weeks ago, we were saying that, and we saw them pop up, and I'm like, man, this might affect the market. And guess what? It didn't have any effect. We got 5-6 contracts on property. So
there's a lot of people sitting on cash right now. And to jump in, another part of the survey, this is what was interesting to me. Let me know in the comments if you think this is interesting. Survey found that only 20% thought it was a good time to buy in this specific survey, while 67% think it's a good time to sell. This is the interesting part. If 2/3 of the people out there think it's a good time to sell, the problem is in that is if they sell, where are they going to buy?
Yeah.
They're going to buy this 10%. So it intrigues me that people think it's a good time to sell when we're potentially looking at 10% interest rates in the next 3 years.
Yeah, the only reason it's a good time to sell in people's eyes is because prices are at their maximum, at the highest they've seen. So in our area, if I would sell right now, I have a huge amount of equity that I could then use somewhere else. And then, some of these people are moving to other areas. So Arlington people sell their massive house and they go move to South Carolina where property values are lower. They can just pay cash, right? That's the big thing about it. So there is that transition. But another thing is the baby boomers, they're at the end of their, life cycles really. And so now they're thinking, all right, well, maybe this is my time to cash in. This is my retirement, and I'll just go live in my other house that I bought, right? And so maybe for those people, which is a huge percentage of the population, it is a good time to sell. But now we look at, there was another article we were looking at where rental rates were just climbing like crazy, but they were stopping here, and the graph was like the prices, the payments for mortgages were even higher.
Yeah, so that was a graph. We'll throw it up on YouTube if you're watching, where the cost to rent kind of tallied all, stopped, and then the cost of a mortgage, just exponentially hockey sticked up.
Yeah.
But Shawn, interest rates go hand in hand with prices. And so there's a recent article from Realtor.com that said, crackdown on hedge fund homebuyers won't lower housing prices, Economist argues. So there's proposed legislation to ban Wall Street hedge funds from snapping up single-family homes. And the Economist has argued that would likely have little impact on home prices. Now, with home prices, it seems like everyone wants to have a boogeyman. It's BlackRock, or no, it's Airbnbs. It's the short-term rentals. Like, we got to ban BlackRock, or we got to ban Wall Street. We got to ban Airbnbs. We got to do all these things to get housing under control. By the way, I think it's just supply. I think it's supply and demand. I think that's what it comes down to, building more houses. But I guess my thought is, what's the downside to banning conglomerate private equities from purchasing like entire neighborhoods? Like, we did a show like a couple years ago where one of these private equity firms bought like 40 houses in a neighborhood and then immediately rented them out. So, I'm all for a free market, and I'm trying to find that balance of, let's build houses for people to live in. Let's not have corporations buy up these houses, but I want to still balance that kind of restriction that Big Brother, the government, has. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is a tough line because there are monopolies that the government restricts. The government does not want monopolies; they break monopolies up. And what happens when BlackRock, like you've mentioned, BlackRock is one of the biggest countries in the world. They have so much cash.
Countries.
I mean, biggest companies in the world. And it could be a country soon.
Yeah,
Right?
I mean, look at their GDP, look at their revenue. It's probably bigger than some
Exactly.
countries.
Yeah, so they have so much cash. They are able to gobble up whole communities. Is that fair? Is that responsible? Is that something that we want? Personally, I don't. I don't think it's something that helps our situation. And when companies get too big, they get, too much power, right? And I don't want companies to have more power than governments do or whatever, vice versa. So you've got to be careful on that. And I think there needs to be some sort of regulation in there. Single family homes are for living in, but there's an argument other ways, right? Like, so there are companies out there that own whole entire rental buildings. And what's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that. So you can go both ways. But I think once a company gets too big and is able to take away from the people that actually want to purchase, and now they're forced to rent because there's nothing to buy, that's where it becomes a problem. So I think there needs to be some sort of restriction, but not a total ban.
The analysis comes as Democrats in the U.S. House and Senate push legislation that would force large institutional investors to sell off their single-family homes to family buyers. So not necessarily sell off, one big apartment building. They're talking about multiple structures. One such bill, the End Hedge Fund Control of America Homes Act,
Wow.
What a name, would impose steep penalties on hedge funds that own any number of single-family homes, as well as other institutions that own more than 50 homes. I mean, if you're an investor, sure, buy up a couple single-family rentals. I mean, once you start getting above a certain threshold, there's got to be some sort of penalty. Like, we can't have corporations just buying like thousands and thousands of homes. I don't know if it would be a higher tax. See, I could never run for any sort of office because my first thing would be to raise taxes, and I wouldn't even make the ballot.
Yeah.
Say raise taxes, and people are like, not voting for this guy.
Yeah.
But I mean, I am okay. Like, what do we do with affordable housing? We, like in Arlington, if a developer wants more density, we're like, yeah, fine if you build in like 10 affordable housing units or 12 units where it's like below the 80% area median income. So there are ways that we can get more tax dollars, right? There are ways we can get more affordable housing units. There are ways that we can build up the community with better amenities and still allow things like hedge funds to buy houses. So I'm trying to find that middle ground.
Yeah, it's tough because, in reality, this company, they have more cash than, God out there. And so they can buy all this stuff. Now, where I was thinking as you were talking, I'm like, well, all right, what are the necessities of life, right? Food and shelter, right? What if this was a food thing, right? We turn it around and say, BlackRock is buying all of our food, right? All of our food. Instead of all of our shelter, they're buying all of our food and then they're reselling it to us or they're renting it out to us or something like that. Like, you have to equate it in those terms a little bit and say, well, this is a necessity of life. And when a company owns too much of that necessity and they control it and they can tell you what to pay, then it becomes a problem, right? And it would be just like food shortages and things like that. So I don't know. I was just trying to like pull something else out there that might equate to that to say, maybe this is bad.
I don't know. I see where you ended up.
Yeah.
I don't know if I agree with the road that you took there.
Yeah.
I don't know if I agree with the food. I see the food and the shelter, but
Yeah.
we live in a capitalistic society.
True.
Where
True.
if you want a roof over your head, you got to work for it. You can't just lollygag through life and expect
Absolutely.
the
100%.
government to unless you live in one of these countries that is like a it's not a welfare. What's Denmark? We're over in Denmark.
Socialist country, maybe, or like a.
I don't know.
It's socialist. They're probably like a.
Yeah, if you know the word, drop it in the comment section below. But they don't have like homeless people. You know, they don't have these issues that other people have. They have like 40% tax rate or 50% tax rate. Maybe I should go maybe Denmark because I like these
40% tax rate, Leighton.
But they don't run into these issues that we're running into because it's just a different way of thinking, a different way of doing business. So I'm not necessarily on board with like the a house should be like free or anything like that. But I see what you mean. Let us know in the comment section below if we're on base or if we're just kind of talking out of our you-know-whats.
Yeah, it's a tough line to draw because you don't want too much government, right? You don't want them to step in and stop you from doing certain things. But at the same time, corporations are a different thing. And there are regulations to corporations. There are things that they need to be controlled. They can't monopolize a certain thing. So once they start gobbling up all the houses and they can keep buying and buying and buying every time something comes up, then it becomes a problem.
Well, Shawn, on the topic of single-family houses and people spending money on their mortgages, a new article came out. Guess how much people spend on their mortgages as a percent of their income? I think I told it to you before. So 24%. American families typically spend 24% of their income on mortgage payments. First-time home buyers typically spend 36.5%. I believe like the rule of thumb is you shouldn't spend more than 28% of your monthly income on your housing payment. I did mine. Do you want to do your calculation real quick?
Yeah, sure.
I did mine right before this. I think I'm at around 23 and a half. So in the first 3 months through March, it's the 24% figure that Americans spend is down from 26% in the prior quarter, but up from 23.3% a year ago. So I'm right around that average. I feel like when I first moved in here, I was spending way too much on my housing payment, and now I feel like I could probably spend a little bit more. But I like where I'm at around 23%. Shawn, what are you at?
I'm a little less than that. I'm about 18%.
You're about 18%.
Yep.
Wow.
Now, I did just buy a second home, so that's going to change a little bit.
Is that because I struggle with like figuring out my gross and my net. So
yeah, it's more of
I basically did my gross, like what I see on the W-9 times like 0.65. So like paying 35% in taxes about to get to like my quote unquote take home pay. Yeah. So I did it that way. If I did it a different way, I may be around 18%. So.
Yeah. I mean, let's call it 20%.
Okay.
Right? Just an easy thing because it fluctuates every year. I didn't go my full gross. I kind of took an average, and I didn't do it after tax. But
do you feel like you're stretching yourself? Do you feel like you're living below your means, above your means, or right about where you should be from a payment standpoint?
As far as money goes, I'm pretty conservative on my money, and that's because I ran into trouble before when I used to flip houses, and so I learned to be like, all right, stow enough away. So I would say that I am I'm still able to save, and I want to save a lot every year, and so I think I'm fine. I'm good
what do you
right
think
now. I don't want to go any higher.
What do you think your payment percentage have been at your previous houses and condos that you've lived in?
It's funny because I have. Back then, if I went to there were two incomes back then.
Because I was gonna say maybe your income was lower, but then you had a second income.
My income was definitely lower. My payment on my house was lower, but I've basically more than doubled my income, but the
payment's only gone up.
Yeah, I haven't doubled my mortgage payment, thankfully. So. I think that most people are probably into the 25% range. And, a lot of times we're looking at a DTI, a debt to income ratio of 40% when a lender is looking at you 45%, somewhere around there. And so that includes your car payments and your school debt and everything else. So yeah, you got to think that about 25% of your income is going towards your housing. That's kind of natural, I would think.
Yeah, if you're looking to buy a house, definitely do the napkin math of, this percentage. Try to keep it around 25 or less. Once you start getting above 30, maybe it's time to reevaluate. Like I said, first-time homebuyers typically spend 36.5%. Oftentimes, first-time homebuyers stretch themselves, but oftentimes that's maybe what you have to do to start building wealth. I know there's a dichotomy there, so I want to be careful not to drink the Kool-Aid too much of, selling houses, but understanding that, that's what you got to do. You got to, have the rice and beans a little bit in that first year.
Oh yeah. And I've definitely done it. You pull back on I remember there was times where it was like, oh, I can't buy this. I don't want to buy this because I want to make sure that I'm good. And especially in a sales job where you're 100% commission, you have to be careful. You don't know what your year to year is going to be. Especially when we're seeing the changes that we're seeing in the industry right now. We don't know what to expect. We don't think it's going away. we hope that we're still able to make a buyer agent commission, and we think we will. I'm positive about, or I should say my mindset is positive about us still earning that income. Do you want to kind of switch modes here and see who else is kind of positive about the
Yeah, let's do it. So, changing topics, a recent article came out. Warren Buffett. So, Berkshire Hathaway usually has their annual meetings in the first week of May. I was reminded of that because I got a reminder of me eating steak in Omaha from 2019 when I attended the Berkshire Hathaway shareholder event. So, Warren Buffett commented on the value of real estate agents. He said, the system has worked out very well. He says he doesn't discount agents even when he buys like multi-million-dollar properties. Now, I know he's lived in the same house his entire life or his entire adult life, but the article does say that he doesn't discount when he purchases. And Greg Abel, who is the vice chair, RIP Charlie Munger, Greg Abel says that the real estate agent is still an important part of these transactions given their expertise and size of the investment. Now, a couple little cliff notes here, Shawn. A couple cliff notes. These gentlemen are both head of Berkshire Hathaway that has Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, a real estate brokerage that just agreed to pay a staggering $250 million in the commission lawsuit. And yeah, so my question to you, Shawn, is are these two guys who own a real estate brokerage saying that they believe in the value of the agent, or is this the greatest investor of all time, absent of the real estate arm of Berkshire Hathaway, agreeing that, a real estate agent's valuable?
Again, I guess you're asking a real estate agent, so I'm going to agree with his investment side.
Yeah.
Yeah, he does own Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, but at the same time, he is the smartest investor ever. And so you've got to think that he knows what he's talking about in this. And I believe he's correct in the fact that the real estate agent is a needed person in the transaction. You can't really get rid of it. And I say that because I'm a real estate agent, because I know what it takes to get these properties to the finish line. And sometimes it's easy. I have to admit, sometimes, you might get a house under contract really quickly and there's no contingencies and boom, it's pretty simple in that regard. But man, there are other times where it is extremely difficult, extremely stressful. And a purchaser going through this one time is going to have troubles, and they need guidance. So you can't just get rid of an agent like you can maybe buying a car or something like that, because there's a lot of different elements to this purchase that you have to take into account. And so if you try to get rid of that person, there is then a lot of liability on somebody else. And who's that liability going to be on? It's going to be either the person that's writing the contract for that person. Maybe it's in the future, it's the listing agent that's doing some sort of service on the side, writing this and not on their own listing. They're not representing the buyer. They are just writing a service. And would that come back to haunt them because they sold them a house that, had termite damage or whatever? They didn't know that they had to do a termite inspection. They didn't know that they had to do a home inspection. How do you know that these buyers aren't going to come back to you? I think there's a lot of liability there that could be on certain people if there isn't an agency relationship on the buyer side.
Abel emphasized that the real estate agent is still an important part of these transactions. Reading from the article, it's the one time in our lives where we make these massive investments, and having that counsel and guidance is critical. Buffett was unfazed at the idea of commission fees, noting that he has not negotiated down the commission even on a multi-million-dollar sale. I've looked at the figures, and I think the system has worked out very well. So there you have it, Shawn.
I believe I agree with him. I think the system, I've been doing this 20 years, the system has worked out great so far. And has anybody really been damaged by this? Apparently so, because of all these lawsuits. But I think as soon as somebody got it in their head, oh my gosh, I didn't know I was paying that. And the reason was because it wasn't clear. Sometimes these agents didn't do their job in proposing the commission the correct way and how that all works. And a lot of agents were saying, my services are free, and they're totally not, So that's, I think, why this all came up. And I'm glad it came up in the fact that it's hopefully going to be clearer now for people to understand who's getting paid what and why they're getting paid that amount.
Speaking of speculating, Shawn, how many agents do you think are going to leave the industry? We may have touched on this before, but I mean, it's got to be tens of thousands. I mean,
lot.
This is going to be a good thing because the consumer wanted better real estate agents. The better real estate agents wanted to, lack of a better term, get rid of the worst real estate agents. And, all of this is being done to hopefully give the consumer a better experience. And if there's a way to raise the bar and honestly maybe raise the fees that we have to pay because there might be like a special assessment coming up for NAR, I'm excited at the prospect of fewer real estate agents going after kind of the same chunk of the pie.
Yeah, I think that's the great thing about it. There's going to be tons of people getting out of this business because they think something's going to happen, or maybe it's going to get a little bit harder. And I'm okay with that. I mean, we have the experience that, I have agents right on my properties all the time. I see what other agents do. Some are really good, some are really bad. And so those bad ones need to kind of either learn quickly or go away. And I think a lot of them will once they find out that it's harder to attain the buyer or harder to get that listing. And it's going to be tough, especially with the low inventory that we're seeing. We're seeing low inventory. We're seeing a lot of agents just leave just based on that, right? They can't get the business. They're not making enough money, so they have to go somewhere else. We saw that in every facet of real estate, right? So you think about the people that rely on real estate agents, title companies, inspection services. I was talking to one of our inspection companies, and they went from like 30 inspectors at one time at the high down to 6. So when you see that type of change, you're going to see a lot of people leave the business. And so we've already seen that them leaving because of low inventory. Now we'll start seeing them because of this commission structure change.
Interesting times. We'll see what happens. So let's move on to our next topic. This comes to us from Nantucket. Now, Shawn and I don't really have any ties to Nantucket, but I kind of see it as one of maybe the most prolific short-term rental markets in terms of just everyone's so rich up there.
Yeah.
And so I'm so curious about affluent real estate markets. And there was quite a big event that happened in the Nantucket real estate market last evening. Island voters voted to reject Article 59, the controversial short-term rental zoning bylaw. So essentially, Article 59 sought to codify short-term rentals as an allowed use in residential island zoning districts. So Article 59 wanted to allow short-term rentals in all of residential areas on the island, and that was shot down. They needed 2/3 of majority. They got like 47%. But the article was a bid to nullify the bombshell Massachusetts land court ruling that was handed down in March that determined Nantucket's zoning code does not allow short-term rentals as principal use of a dwelling. Are you confused yet? So we have the land use saying from the Massachusetts land court saying that zoning short-term rentals are illegal, and then you have Article 59 trying to say that you can allow short-term rentals on Nantucket, and that was shot down. And so now you're kind of in this gray area because there is a line in the Nantucket code that says you can still use your short-term rental, and it's classified under a quote-unquote accessory dwelling, even if it's like a primary residence. So essentially, you're in one big gray area. So my question to you, the listener, the watcher, and Shawn is how do you find the middle ground? Seems to be my MO, because someone was quoted as saying, if we ban short-term rentals, we're decimating our island economy, preventing Nantucket from becoming a gated community, or he said prevent Nantucket from becoming a gated community for people who don't need to rent out their homes. As if to say, if you don't allow short-term rentals, the only people that can go to Nantucket are, the 10 people that stay in hotels, if they have hotels, and then the people that, buy Nantucket houses for like $8 million.
Yeah.
If you allow short-term rentals, well, now you can have people that can maybe age in place. Now you can have maybe more seasonal jobs from all the tourist activity. So now what's going to happen is the Nantucket residents and the board are going to go back, rework this, and continue to try to figure out a way forward for short-term rentals on Nantucket. So, Shawn, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, short-term rentals have a there's areas that they work really well. And that are areas where people vacation. And where do people vacation is Nantucket. So trying to change that now when it's always kind of, I mean, are there short-term rentals now on Nantucket? So now you're trying to change it. And what happens? Why do they change it? It's because the super rich go and they gobble up all the properties and then they try to change things to say, I don't want people here anymore. This is where I live. And I don't want vacationers anymore. I don't want that. So they're basically banning or trying to stop people from vacationing there and using their property the way that they purchased it. A lot of people purchased properties as a second home, which I just did, and they're going to supplement their payment by Airbnb-ing it. So what if they did that to the area that I just purchased in? I could still afford the property, but does it make the best sense for me? No, I want to be able to supplement my payment by renting it out.
But you don't live there. Like, we're talking about people that live in Nantucket, people that have grown up there, that see it as a neighborhood, and then you have this revolving doors of parties and you don't get to know your neighbors.
That's what happens when you live in an extremely beautiful area where people vacation. It's a vacation spot. Ocean City, Maryland. It doesn't matter where it is up along the seaboard. People are vacationing there. They're going there. It's a high rental area. The beach is where people want to go vacation for a week, enjoy their summer for a little bit, get away from their job. It's what it is, And if you purchase there and thinking that you were going to change the whole island, that's, maybe that's not the way to kind of look at it. You have a huge gated house to yourself, enjoy your land. And I don't know. I mean, I could go back and forth. If somebody was Airbnb-ing a property right next to me and it was loud and partying constantly, I'd be pissed too, So I see it both ways. I can understand it. But when you're buying in a beach town, you have to know that people are vacationing there. It's a different style. It's a different type of living. And so if you want that beach living, you're probably going to pay for it in another way. And, down in North Carolina, my friends have lived down there. They live down there full-time, full year round. And they learned that, yes, it does get rowdy. There's a lot of turnover. There's a lot of partying. So what did they do? They moved to a small gated community that it wasn't allowed. So like you can find those small gated communities where it's not allowed, but to change all of the Outer Banks to a non-Airbnb would be a mess. That's where everybody goes. So that's the kind of thing that it's almost impossible to do.
What do you think the solution is here? Because Nat Philbrick, who's an island historian and author, said that Nantucketers have been renting out their homes for decades and hundreds of years.
Yeah.
But the commercial short-term rental phenomenon is not something the old-timers were dealing with back in the day. This is something very new just in the last 10 years. It's radically changed my neighborhood, being Nat Philbrick's neighborhood, and it's changing the island. Year-round, Nantucketers have always rented out their homes, but this is different. Online platforms like Airbnb have created an economic hothouse that is, to my mind, not sustainable. Jobs are everywhere, but no one can find a place to live.
So they're saying that all the properties were gobbled up and now they're just being Airbnb'd and no one can find a stable place in Nantucket.
Yeah, they're saying it's Airbnb on steroids. They're saying, realtors and contractors are slowly casing the neighborhood, trying to see which house has potential to buy and then to not ever sell and to turn into a short-term rental.
Well, you've got to kind of treat it as maybe the how we were saying the corporations, right? Corporations should be capped at owning so much property. Maybe there is a cap on how many rentals you can have in that area, how many Airbnbs, because let's face it, people want to live there too, right? They don't want it all gobbled up by one particular industry. And so you've got to be okay with saying, all right, well, maybe we've got to plateau it here. I don't know. I mean, that's a tough thing because the evolution of real estate is changing constantly. And our work-life balance has changed dramatically in 10 years. So for us to keep up with this is really hard because it's changing. Technology has changed us so much and so quickly in the last 10 years. And to keep up with it is hard. So changing these laws and seeing it after the fact and saying, wow, look how this island has changed. I don't like the way it is anymore. I'm going to move somewhere else, or I don't want to move, or we got to change the laws. You can understand that, right?
Yeah. So I'm asking you what should be done. And, what should be done is look at other areas that have run into this problem and what have they done. So another area that comes to mind is Palm Springs. So the Palm Springs short-term rental market, I think most people would classify it as like a disaster. Like it was a hotbed. I think the guy in the article said hot house. It was a hotbed for short-term renters and pretty soon short-term renter investors, STR investors. And then it swung in the complete other direction, and they almost banned Airbnbs in Palm Springs. So according to a couple articles I'm looking at, in 2022, there's an ordinance to ban to have no more than 20% of the properties being short-term rentals in any of the city's 66 neighborhoods. I believe there's also caps, so you have to have at least a 3-night stay. And I believe, this is the kicker, that you can only rent out your house for a maximum of X number of days. I can't recall if that's like 36 days or 64. You get the idea. So there are ways to do this. In some areas, you can't rent out for less than 28 days. Obviously, I don't think a long weekend or a week town like Nantucket would do something like that. But whether it's raising taxes, whether it's doing no more than 20% of the properties. Here's the kicker with Palm Springs. You know what happened to property values? They tanked. They went down. Now,
supply and demand always gets you.
This is such a dichotomy because, all right, property values went down. Isn't that what people wanted? But then you're like, okay, well, now the tax base is less, and now people have, lost equity, and now they may be, underwater on their house, and it's like, whoa, no one's going to play the world's smallest, violin for an STR investor who's underwater on their property. But I don't know if we want to enact things that we know are going to decimate property values. So it's finding some sort of solution there.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the whole thing. It's really difficult because everybody sees the shiny object and they go after the shiny object. It's just like, when a beach gets popular in Thailand, right? And because DiCaprio went there and filmed there, and now everybody wants to go there, and they destroy it. And then they say, you know what? No more. We don't want you here anymore. And this is exactly what's happening with the short-term rental kind of thing. It's like, hey, Palm Springs is the hot spot. Arizona, everybody's going there to golf. Let's go. Everybody buys these things, and then it just destroys it. So yes, I believe that it's a good idea to cap it in some way. Either you say, all right, you can only, if you're a short-term renter or rental home, there's 52 weeks a year, you can only rent it out X amount of weeks on a weekly basis or a 3-day minimum basis. So whatever that adds up to, say it's 25% of the time. That would at least alleviate the feeling that if you live next to it, well, it's not going to be constantly rented another week all the time, and it gives us some relief.
How about Shawn Battle for Nantucket County Board, City Board, Island Board?
Hey, you got to kind of play it to both sides. You got to see both sides of it, right?
What if we just continued this episode for another hour and just shot ideas back and forth on how to fix the Nantucket real estate market?
Hey,
what about that?
Yeah, let's do it.
Send it to all these articles. All right, Shawn, let's move on to in or out.
All right.
Whether you're in or out on a property. It's in Arlington.
Oh, dude.
And it's not only
Bang
in Arlington.
my head off a wall,
it's
man.
in Roslyn. So, Shawn, let me introduce you. He already knows this one. 1411 Key Boulevard. He knows what I'm going to do here. Unit number 306 is a 2-bed, 2-bath, 1,066 square foot unit. Tour this amenity-filled luxury condo built in 2018, located in the Key and Nash condominium in the heart of walkable Roslyn. Special features include 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, living room, dining area, open gourmet kitchen, balcony, wood flooring, garage parking space with secure storage, and you have use of a secluded private courtyard. But Shawn, that's not the reason I'm asking you this question. It's listed for, by the way, I didn't say that, $824,972. Very specific price because they change the price by $1 every single day.
Every
single day.
Guys.
It's been on the market with a discount broker for 232 days. By the way, Shawn, do you think that's below average or above average?
That's above.
Okay,
way
that's
above average.
Probably above average by about 200 days. So we started, when did we start? We started in 9/23. So September 2023 at $849,990. Okay, so $850 basically. and we were off the market a little bit. We came back on at 824 at 999. How many price adjustments do you think they've made now that they're down to 824, 972?
I mean, it's every day I get a new update says, hey, so I have
50, maybe 50 price adjustments.
At least
Okay.
50 price adjustments.
You go on Zillow and they show the price adjustment. It goes minus $2.
minus $1, minus $2. It's $1 every
gone
day.
down.
This is the worst strategy ever. Not only, all right, you're getting a lot of people looking at your property every day, and you know what it's saying?
They're laughing at you.
They're laughing at you. You're desperate. You look like a fool. Never do this. So basically what happens is when you change the price, it updates everybody that has a search in that area, in that price point every day. It's going to say, hey, here's that property again. Hey, here's that property again. Guess what they have never done? Change the first picture. Like, do you think maybe changing the picture once might do something better? Why not show an interior picture? Why not show a different picture than the same one you've shown for 232 days? There are definitely different ways of marketing this property. And let's face it,
the interior photos aren't any better.
You haven't staged it. You haven't staged it better. You haven't retaken photos. You haven't done any. You're still pots and pans.
There's like a water filter. What is that on the counter?
Water filter on the counter. If you took a little bit of time to say, all right, instead of changing this price every day, why don't we go into the property and see what's wrong with it? Let's stage it. Let's price it correctly. Right now, it's not priced right because you're changing the price every day. You've come down $25,000 over 230 days. You need to be under $800,000. I'm sorry you paid too much for it at Key and Nash, because Key and Nash was one of those properties that people thought was going to be this amazing thing. And in my opinion, it's not a luxury property. It's a newer condo. It was trying to compete with the neighbor next door, which is Turnberry Tower, which it doesn't compete with. It was trying to get similar prices. You have a small square footage for a high price condo. And now you realize after you purchase it that maybe it wasn't the best investment. So how do you get rid of it? Sorry, you're going to have to lose a little bit of money on this property and get it to where the market's going to pay for it.
I kind of feel bad for the agent because it's not the agent's strategy. I wonder for the homeowner, if you're watching this, Mr. or Mrs. Homeowner, where'd you get this strategy? Like what real estate coach, what Reddit thread told you to just spam all the agents and adjust the price down $1 every single day? Like, is this a game? Like, do you enjoy just losing money when you sell your property? I'm so baffled by this. It's a terrible strategy. It's backfiring immensely. And I think the market's going to speak, and I would be surprised if they sold it with the first number being an 8.
I would be very surprised. And it's, believe me, I saw it this morning. Delete. As soon as I get it. I get it every day. I'm like, this is the worst strategy ever. It's showing desperation, in my opinion, without dropping the price and without doing anything else.
I wonder if someone has offered, $815,000. What do you think? They negotiate down like $10?
No, not going to do it. Yeah, I'll give you $1 off.
We'll negotiate $13 on this one. No,
man,
I'm out on this property.
I'm totally out.
Sean's
just
out
on,
as well.
Just on principle.
Just on spite.
Yeah, on spite.
On pure
it's just
spite.
annoying. It's annoying. Price it right. Get it showing right the first time you go on the market. And listen, we're all trying to figure out this market and pricing and everything else, and we don't exactly know. Sometimes we're off on pricing. But if you look at your comps and you look, the problem is you got to stay inside the building. A lot of times you try to go out to Turnberry Tower, your value's not there. Turnberry Tower is a totally different building. Stay inside the building to get your value. And price it right and make it look good the first time, and it'll sell.
Wise words from Mr. Battle. Well, let us know your thoughts and comments in the comment section below. And for Shawn and myself, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, we'll see you then.
Take care.